I read a book, so let's talk about it. So the book that I read is called Wishful Drinking by the infamous Carrie Fisher, who you may remember from this type of fame. I can't do it justice. Now, for those of you who may be looking at this book as, ooh, a behind-the-scenes memoir about Star Wars, this is not that kind of book. This is a book about someone who ended up in Star Wars at a very early age, but was also the product of a Hollywood family and dealt with a lot of manic depression, drug addiction, alcoholism throughout the rest of her life to date. Now, this book exists in another format. It was originally a one-woman show that was very successful, but it's helpful to keep that in mind as you're reading it. In fact, I happened to listen to this book on Audible, not a sponsor, I'm not that famous, but I would recommend using Audible to listen to this book. Since it is narrated by the author, it sometimes helps. I find that I'm listening to way more audiobooks, especially when the author happens to be the person narrating it, because it kind of gives kind of an insider perspective of what are the phrases I should really focus in on. Now, Carrie Fisher has had kind of a rough life. She talks a lot about her failed relationship with Paul Simon, how she turns men gay, how she wakes up next to dead people. It's not pretty, but what's funny about the book is that at no point do you ever necessarily feel depressed. She's been through a lot, but her attitude throughout the entire book is really a matter of almost schadenfreude in her own life. You know, that you pleasure at the pain of others, but at her own expense. And it kind of conveys the perspective of someone who has gone through a lot. She is, as far as I can tell from Wikipedia, she's still undergoing a ECT, which is the brain shock treatment stuff for manic depression. And yet it's the sort of thing where, you know what? There's nothing to be gained by just being mopey about it. Let's try and find out how this is hilarious. Now, the book is fairly short, it's pretty dry, and it's fairly slow paced, so if you have tastes that lean away from that, you might want to avoid this book. However, if you're the type of person that really enjoys rather dry wit, I would definitely recommend this book, though I can't say that I necessarily would have enjoyed it much if I hadn't been listening to Carrie Fisher read it with the voice that kind of added to what she was saying. That said, it is a very funny book. There's some great one-liners, and the thing that I think I found most compelling about the book is that she has lived this kind of crazy star-filled life, yet the way that she relates the stories, it is incredibly personable. Any of us who have dealt with minor inconveniences or, you know, seasonal depression or things like that, despite the fact that her condition is way beyond what most of us could possibly imagine, can certainly relate to the way that she tackles it and the way that life is going to be what it is. Let's laugh at it. This book kind of jumped to the top of my reading list after I saw Stephen Fry's documentary, The Secret Life of the Manic Depressive, which I also recommend if you're interested in knowing more about those types of disorders. It has a bit of a narrative to it as well, and, you know, leaves some messages about you know, depression and manic depression in particular. If you enjoyed this book, I would also thoroughly recommend that you take a look at Julia Sweeney's, I think she calls them monologues, but they're available on Audible. Letting Go of God, In the Family Way, God Said Ha. Very compelling stories, and they're just, they basically are presented as a one-woman show. She gets up and she tells a story for several hours, but it is thoroughly entertaining. She was on Saturday Night Live, so she has a comedic background, but they're very heartfelt as well, and that's definitely what I took away from this book. Personally, for me, I absolutely loved it. I could certainly understand that there are people who wouldn't, but if you feel like giving it a shot, it's pretty short, so yeah, Wishful Drinking, 2 martini glasses up, out of a scale of 2. I don't know, because you can only hold 2 in your hands. This isn't going anywhere. I will be reading more stuff. There's stuff in my queue, and I will post new videos as soon as I've read something else of note. So until then, keep reading. Bye. So today we're going to talk about An Unquiet Mind, a memoir of moods and madness by K. Redfield Jamison. Now, this author is known in the psychiatric field as really having pushed the boundaries of understanding with regards to manic depression, but she also suffers from the condition herself. And this book chronicles her experiences from when she was very little and she was dealing with her father's manic depression to the point where she decided she wanted to go into psychiatry, psychology, and then discovering that she had this problem herself. Now, before we go any further, I should say that it's very hard to review a book like this without feeling like you're passing judgment on the individual, not even the individual as an author, but the individual as a person, because she had